So I'm 41. I just turned 41 on my birthday, February the 1st. Unfortunately, I was very sick on my birthday. Couldn't really do much. But also around my birthday, just after, I got word that essentially my biological grandfather passed. And there's a long story behind that. But one of the things that's crazy is if you don't know the story, let me just back. My wife and I, when we were dating, we gifted each other an Ancestry DNA kit because I didn't know much of my life up until 4 years ago. I actually was not sure who my father was. And it was always one person possibility and then another very jaded possibility. Those were the options, but what I found out was that it wasn't the jaded version. And so again, I was able to confirm. So I just wanted to show y'all because I'm here. Hold on, I'm gonna pause because I want you to see it. So when I say I literally grew up next to my grandmother and grandfather and didn't know it, I wanted to show y'all how close I mean. So I'm gonna turn the camera around. Actually, let me turn around to my back. There. You know what I mean? Not to show all the details, but here. This is where I grew up, Randall Street in Conyers, Georgia. And growing up on this street was a lot of community. I actually got to be right around family, but that to say, I want this property that's right across. I want this property. I just want to know, is there anyone else out there who knows they need therapy, but you know, you do a little self-healing because essentially I tried therapy and well, for whatever reason, we'll just say it didn't work out. You know, people say keep going until you find the right therapist. I've never found the right therapist, so I don't have one. But my life is so crazy that, again, often enough, I could probably use it. Now, I'm sane enough, I think, and I try to be constructive with how I cope, but, you know, stuff gets crazy sometimes. So, said all that to say, yeah, I just want to talk about what kind of just transpired and just how I feel about it. So, I'm in my 40s, and up until recently, I had no confirmation that my biological father was my biological father. In fact, growing up, I didn't know who my biological father was to some degree. So I had options, if you will. I had a story that essentially made my grandfather my father. I had another possibility, and then some up in the air. And not to get it twisted, in the entire time, the story for my mother was consistent. So when I was in my younger 20s, I called this other, not my grandfather, but this other guy who was supposed to be my father. And crazy enough, he told me that I'm trying to preserve feelings, and I guess, you know what I mean, to tell the story, like, I can't preserve feelings. So all that to say, I called this guy, I called him, you know what I mean, was told basically, like, if you have questions, like, you know, call and ask. And again, it had gotten to the point where I had asked so many questions over the years that was no way that he believed I could be his child, because back when he was doing it back in his high school days, he had essentially a number of women, and several women had come to him and said that, you know, they had children by him, and it turned out that they weren't his, to the degree that of the several women that alleged that, you know, he had children, or they had children by him, he got to the point where he was like, you're gonna have to prove it type thing. And this is, again, this is his story. And so I think 4 women, right, proved that he had children, so he has 4 boys. And what he told me in that conversation was that he didn't believe that he could have girls. And so when my mother came to him and told him, he didn't believe it, because he could only have boys. And so I guess there was the back, I don't know if there was back and forth or not, I don't, whatever transpired. My mother's story was, well, fine, like, if you're not going to be there, I'll raise her by myself, so on and so forth. Never sue child support or anything like that. So all that to say, like, or visitation or anything like that, you know, or custody. So that to say, like, you know, I grew up without him. But the crazy thing is that I later learned in life that the people who I was told was my family, I literally grew up like right next door to, and grew up, you know, around them, going to school with them. Never knew. And it, like, to some degree, like, it almost wants to, I mean, it almost brings tears to my eyes. To think of, like, how deep some of the stories go, how long the history was, and again, I want to build up to what transpired today, not too long ago, what have you, and just kind of how I feel now, but it's crazy because, again, like, I look back and, like, I went to school with some of these people, some of these people who were family members and or, you know, close to family and all this stuff. It's like there were people around that knew me, but I never knew. And anyhow, fast forward a few years. All right, I've gotten married once, divorced once. I'm about to get married again. Love of my life. You know what I mean? This time is the right one. Several relationships, you know, and relationship issues that arose from some of this. But nonetheless, so I'm with my soulmate, and after our first year of dating and what have you, we gifted each other a DNA test, and our ancestry DNA test. Long story short, so she found her family, like she found some siblings who then led her to find her father, and you know, her story is her story. But that to say, I had some conversations with her, you know, after a couple of years, and was just like, yo, I'm so happy, like, that's amazing. But what sucks is, like, dang, I really wanted to find mine too. Like, I was hoping to find my family and confirm, like, who my family was, right? So I knew the paternal side of my family, and actually, so just to give you a little backstory on, I'll say that for another time. So not too long after I said that to her, I don't know, maybe 6 months, maybe to a year, but I get a hint, and that hint says that this person who popped up was my my half sibling. And then from that hint, I also start getting cousins. So now I'm able to put it together because I know who this person father is the person who I was told was my father. So now I've got a blood match to a half sibling, and you know, the rest is history, right? And the rest is history. Yeah. The rest is history. A lot of layers. Nevertheless. So follow me. I call him. No, I think I reach out. I had a couple. I reach out a couple times, and essentially, like the half sibling, like says nothing, you know, what have you. Like there's no help or anything like that. Which again, not being hurt by whatever, but you know, what I mean, my wife when she was going through her family welcomed her. So I guess I had an expectation of that, but it didn't pan out that way. And again, not that I was like, you know, hurt by it, although I'm sure there are feelings around it. But on a surface level, you know, it's fine. I kind of wanted to get to the bottom of it. Well, I wanted to know him at the time. I'll say that. But you know, when that was the response, like, when it's a random person contacting you, like, you know, and or maybe not. I don't know what they have been told or anything like that. So anyhow, I called them back. And I'm like, yeah, you know, oddly enough, you know, took this test, this popped up, so on and so forth. And so I just wanted to let you know that, you know, kind of doing well in life. You know, we have a conversation. He's asking me how I'm doing in life and what's going on now, so on and so forth. And I'm like, you know, explain to him, like, yeah, I'm not doing too bad. So in fact, you know, I've got a storefront, and my store is going to be opening. You should come to the store opening. And so he came to the store opening. So again, this is kind of the first time with acknowledgement and confirmation that we have a, you know, we have now conversed, and like, you know, he shows face and so forth. So we probably had 3 or 4 more hefty conversations after that, kind of catching up on life. You know, he had heard that I had traveled a bit, and you know, was asking about things, about life, about my wife, about kids, about you know, where I went to school and stuff like that. And so, which again, part of it was known because over the years, I didn't really have friends my age. I would come back from college and go visit all of my elders, including the elders on the street that I grew up with, because I had always been close to them. I would come and sit for 3 hours and talk to, and I'm going to give names, you know, Miss Sis. I would come and sit with Miss Mary, who was my biological grandmother. I would sit with her for an hour and talk to her. But I only knew her as Miss Mary, the neighbor next door. But now, she's confirmed my grandmother. And so, in this relationship with my wife, I'm telling her like how odd it was that I grew up with this impression, and I'm sad and I'm happy, but I'm sad and I'm happy, but at the same token, like, things could have been different. I could have known them. I could have known my family. I could have known my health history. There are things about my health history that, like, I didn't know that I found out. I'm looking at things like sitting with Miss Mary now different. Like, I'm sitting across, I go to visit her and I'm sitting across from her and I'm looking at her hands and I'm like, dang, that's why my fingers don't look like my brothers and sisters. That's why, you know what I mean? They look more like my grandmothers than my siblings or my mom's. Kind of, you know, same thing with personality and so on and so forth. There are some things, and anyhow, I get to know them a little better, so on and so forth, but there's still no real communication. Again, over the course of years, 4 years, we talked about 3 times, and you know, 3 or 4 times, that was that. He even came up to my house once, helping with some electricity. So funny enough, aside from owning a storefront, I'm also a licensed realtor, and I build houses. And I've always loved architecture. I have many loves. I like designing clothes. I love designing cars. I like designing houses. Some of those things I have not done in many, many years. And this is aside from singing and drawing and painting, and so on and so forth, or what have you. But there's a creative in me, and part of that is architecture, real estate, and a passion that I have for it. And so, motorcycles, riding motorcycles. I mentioned that to say, so in short, even his brother, crazy enough, I graduated from high school. When I graduated from high school, his brother and his wife bought me a gift, showed up to the graduation. I know this truck. My mother had told me again in the story, that's your uncle, that's your father, or what have you. Other than, again, graduation, no engagement in my life, didn't know anything else about him or anything like that. So, just, I don't know. I don't even know what to say. It was odd. But, recently, so again, over the course of years, like I've gone and sat with Miss Mary, we talk now, you know, when I see her, it's how's the family, how's your wife, you know, when I see her, how is the family, how's, you know, your family and everyone, well, everyone's well, we'll sit there, we'll talk about travels, we'll talk about politics, we might talk about, you know, what's going on in the news, what's going on with food, what's going on with other people, elder people that we knew. Like she'll ask about, how's your grandmama, how was your aunt doing? My aunt happened to be her best friend, that I grew up with, happened to be her best friend, so she was always in and out, again, of the house. That's Miss Mary. Hey, Miss Mary, so on and so forth. So, fast forward, I get wind that my uncle passed, my biological grandfather, Mr. Gus, passed, and his sister, I believe, passed. And it was crazy because, so for 2-3 years, like I didn't even look back at the Ancestry DNA thing I wasn't going through because I didn't want to pay for it. Let me back up. When I was in my 20s and I had the conversation, I asked him about having a blood test. And he basically told me that he'd be willing to have one if I paid for it. I paid for it. And I was like, Ninja, I don't even know that bad. If you're not going to admit to it and you don't even want to admit to the possibility because you're telling me all you could have was boys and that you didn't believe it even though you were the first and only person, supposedly, I guess, that my mother had been with and all this stuff or what have you. Like, it wasn't even worth the hassle to me. I'm the one going out of my way to try to call and find you. Like, you ain't never, I asked him, like, you ain't never wondered. You've seen me over time. Like, you never, you know, thought to ask or anything like that. So, at the end of the day, I was like, you don't care. I don't want to care. So, I was not going to pay for the test. So, anyhow, yeah. So I kept wind that they passed, and just a lot of mixed feelings come up again because I'm like, dang, like I turned 41 and I had booked or gotten a cameraman, gotten someone that I wanted that was going to follow me around for my birthday. Alright, I have a lot going on, a lot of businesses, I need some content creation, and I had reached out to hire someone, a cameraman, to follow me around for my birthday because I wanted to go around to the various projects that I have going on, to the various entities that I own, to the various rental properties that I have, or what have you, to the various accomplishments that I've achieved, and I kind of, you know, talk about them and get some content. And one of those things was I wanted to be, I didn't get a chance to capture my grandmother much. She passed a couple years ago at 103. My grandfather, who is still alive, but again, I wanted to capture some of their essence because My brand name is Millen Heirs. Millen is my last name. Heir, as in heir to the throne. And because I have so many passions, I started the brand after leaving corporate, or leaving I guess you could consider a corporate job. I got fired. I was having health issues, nearly died, ended up having to have surgery, an emergency surgery at that. In the surgery, the initial surgery was for fibroids, and I was supposed to have some very small pinholes or holes in my stomach to actually have them removed. But when I woke up from surgery, the surgeon basically told me they weren't able to remove them that way, that they had to open me up, slice me down the middle, essentially, and that I shouldn't turn to the side or anything like that, because again, my stitches and the healing time may be a little longer. And so essentially I went from being out of work for 4 weeks to applying to extend my leave. And in that, while I was in the hospital bed, while I was being taken to surgery and being put under, I was receiving text messages from my boss. When I finished, I was home, and after 2 weeks, I'm still getting text messages asking me to work and do things, and I essentially replied back with a not so respectful message, letting them know that I was on approved leave and that I was not going to be working until I returned to work, and then, because I was trying to heal. Now, mind you, this was also the first vacation or time that I had really had off in about 6 years as well. And so I felt deserving. Part of the reason that I was where I was also was due to stress from the job, and the marriage that failed, so on and so forth. But nonetheless, I needed the time off. I got approved time off to heal and to go through surgery, and I wanted to utilize that time. But my boss did not like that. And so essentially, the day I returned to work, I got fired. There were excuses and there was conversation, whatever, but that was the pushback. But if they didn't word it like, I'm going to fire you, the wording was, we want to release you to follow your dreams. And yes, I was emotional about it, probably for a couple years. I lamented probably lost that job, I'm not gonna lie. But I always, from the moment, because I went into the meeting with my letter of resignation, ready to let them know that, hey, you were doing the most, and if it comes down to it, I'll quit before you fire me. But when I found out that they were gonna fire me and give me a severance, I was like, well, I might as well let this ride. So I said, prior to that, with my health, with regards to everything, I'd been praying, God, if it's meant for me, work it out. God, if it's meant for me, resolve this. If not, take it away. So essentially, when that happened, I took it as a sign from God, or a message from God, that it was just time for me to move on. And so when as I was moving on, as I was healing, I ended up, speaking to my now wife, and I was, telling her, I don't even know what I want to do, but I'm going to do. But I had this severance package. And so from there, I kind of, I was like, I was lost with regards to my career. I went to school for air traffic control, computer science, psychology, and meteorology. And unfortunately, I couldn't finish college because not only, I failed out, flunked out, if you will, but it was because I was working 3 jobs and trying to double major and double minor. I got burnt out, and the last semester I essentially failed out. And I didn't there's a lot of backstory behind that as well. I wasn't supposed to go to school for that, didn't want to go to school for that, but because my mother had told me that my pastor at the time was my spiritual father, and that he had heard from God, and God told him that I should be an air traffic controller, and my mother and I had gotten into an argument about it, and because she knew my passion was architecture, engineering, and architecture is what I wanted to go to school for at Michigan State. But again, she thought it rebellious that if I didn't listen, and so the long story short is I ended up going to school for air traffic control, computer science, psychology, and meteorology, and not finishing. A lot of thoughts about that as well, but essentially it still led me on a path to be able to travel and do things that have shaped my life, that later on in life I was very appreciative of, and I lost the grievances that I had around going to college for what I didn't want to go to college for, and so on and so forth. So fast forward again to me starting my business and getting the severance. I didn't know what I wanted to call it, and so I started off, I think, making bracelets. I think was my first thing. It was bracelets, candles, and hair oil, because I was growing locks, and my locks were very long, and people had asked me to make them some hair oil and things for them, and so that was where I started. However, I always knew that I wanted it to evolve into something bigger, but I can't have children. And when I think about legacy or creating generational wealth and so on and so forth, I look back at my life and I am very grateful that I have a very heavy influence from the elders in my life. From those that instilled much in me. And so, because I didn't know the paternal side of my family, and I didn't belong to my stepfather's family, I felt that the only identity in that moment, leaving my job, leaving my that ex-marriage, leaving kind of the past behind, so on and so forth, the only thing that I could really cling to was Millen, because that was my name, and the Millen side of my family, because that was the only family that I have ever known. And when I thought about my family, like I thought about really like the overarching message that, so the farthest person back that I could think of that I knew was my great-grandfather. His name was Huraz. And his whole thing was, I felt like he fought so hard after hearing some stories that I've heard about my family, to move from his family safely from South Georgia due to some issues with ownership, if you know what I mean. And so he moved the family up here, and my grandfathers worked on the highways at the time. They helped build the bridges over Interstate 20, I-20, between, I guess, the Social Circle, Conyers, Covington area, and up through that area. My grandfather also helped, or has help build houses throughout Conyers and Lithonia, and renovate houses throughout Conyers and Lithonia, and so on and so forth. Very heavy in construction. He, you know, did his own construction thing for 70-something years. In fact, the property that I own now, you know, his. I got it from him. He built it back in the 80s. Bought it from him. And some of the things that I like drawing, whether it was singing, dancing, so on and so forth, I just felt that who I had become was mostly influenced by the Millen side of my family. So, in trying to think of what I would leave, or the impact that I would leave, if anything, again, since I don't have any blood children, I named the name of my company Millen Heirs. Again. So from that, I also had several recipes. I say several recipes, just recipes like little, not recipes, remedies to life, if you will, philosophies from my grandfather that I felt like I carried forward, or my great grandmother that I felt like I carried forward, or carried with me, that carried me forward. So, for one, again, it was hard. It was hard at one point, and my grandmother would say, you know, I'd walk in and she'd be like, "You doing okay, baby?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm hanging in there." And she'd be like, "All right, baby, just keep on keeping on, man." You know, my grandfather used to say, you know, be particular always and always. He would say, be particular. And I think I added the always and always. But he'd say, be particular, which means, you know, like, be particular about your friends. Be particular about, be intentional is basically what he meant. And so, again, I started the brand off that. That brand turned into opening the storefront. And also that turned into some of the drawing and stuff turned into me designing some small businesses, which I freelance. I do small business conceptualization, you know, because being a visionary and envisioning things and envisioning. And so from there I got licensed as a realtor, and I also started building houses. And I'm pursuing my general contractor's license, but fast forward to this past weekend, and my biological brother had his funeral, his uncle, and I come to find out that all of them were licensed electricians. Go figure. And he loved to ride motorcycles, travel the country, ride motorcycles. Go figure. So I just thought it very interesting, but that to also say that was this past weekend. And when I was at the funeral, I felt like such a stranger. In fact, I had to sit over with the friends and friends and other ministers side, and I'm looking over at the other family, and I'm texting my wife, and I'm like, yeah, I think these are my people. I was like, babe, it's crazy, like how, like, I can kind of see how I look like these older people in the family, and I can kind of see, like, the older uncles and stuff, like, little hints of them in like, their hands and the shape of, like, their bone structure and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, I think they are. I was like, them combined with the Millens, like, that's me. And she was like, well, yeah, they are your blood. And I'm like, damn, you're so right. And again, I'm 40, in my 40s, and I'm just like, that is crazy. But I felt like such a stranger. Even after the funeral, I went up to Miss Mary to give her a hug, and I went to my biological father and shook his hand, and he was out talking to the family and the friends and talking about everything that was going on, and it was still like I felt like such a stranger, that unfortunately I just felt really sad. All three of them died back to back, but the very next, so that was on my uncle Lewis's funeral was on a Saturday, on Saturday. Today is what, February 15th. It was last Saturday, and biological grandfather's funeral was on Sunday. Now, mind you, my birthday was February the 1st. Again, I hadn't really been out in public because I was sick. But I was feeling better by the funeral, and everything was good, over with. I was back to work, and so I said, okay, I'm going to try to go down to the funeral. And because of what happened on Saturday, when Sunday came, which happened to be Super Bowl Sunday as well, my wife was throwing me a little birthday get-together. And she was like, are you going to go to the funeral? And I was like, I don't think so. I felt like any conversation in the spiritual realm that I wanted to have with my biological grandfather, who I never really knew, but, could potentially be a spirit guide or ancestor, is an ancestor, that I could have alone. That actually being there to actually be at the funeral again made me feel such emotions that I would rather be happy on my birthday and spend time with people who celebrated me rather than tolerated me. And so I didn't go to my grandfather's funeral, biological grandfather's funeral. And I said to myself, I'll just take Miss Mary, a gift or something later this week, because I also know she's tired burying 3 of your loved ones. They were married for 68 years. And, who knows how she's feeling and what she's going through or whatever. But I just knew it wasn't the time to center me. And so I said, I'll just go and visit her, next week and take her some flowers or take her a plant, something like that. So today I stopped by to take her a plant, but she wasn't there. And so then I, went to go visit my family for a moment and thought I'd give it a minute and see if, she'd be back home. And I stopped back by the house and she wasn't there. And so I left the plant and a card for her on her doorstep. And while I was there, I was looking at the land across the street and the house that I grew up in, and like some of that land is empty. And so I want to purchase some of that land. Ideally would be ideal. My grandfather built the house on that street. Helped build the houses on that street. I really want to own the house that he built, but they lost it to bankruptcy. My biological grandfather and grandmother got divorced on my mother's side, and grandfather ended up, again, I think, losing it to like a bankruptcy or something like that. And one of the families who technically I believe is my family, but don't know, but at least grew up on the street around, ended up buying the house. And but there's another plot of land across the street from it that is now empty, that there used to be a house there that has been torn down. So I'm sure one of them or someone around that is very familiar with the family owns it. But I would love to, I'm going to do some research and try to see if I can find out who, because I would love to buy it. And so while I was there, leaving the plant on her doorstep, I had my camera out and I was filming the land, and I was also talking and telling the story, which I'll circle back, or the video, I guess I'll plug it in now. As I was walking around and trying to get through this story and tell the story, I was interrupted by someone who passed by, a guy who passed by who apparently knew, the house, knew Miss Mary, and he stops me in the street and he's like, what's going on, buddy? How you doing? And I said, how are you? And he was like, yeah, this is my mother's house. I said, oh, really? Because this is my grandmother. And I was like, yeah, this is my biological grandmother's house. I, come by all the time, at least for the past 25 years. I do come by and talk to her, but I realized, she wasn't home, and so I was just, leaving a gift for her. But I saw some empty land over here, so I was walking the street, walking and looking at it. And so he goes, "Oh, so you wasn't at Papa Gus's funeral?" I said, "Yeah, I was there." "Well, no, I wasn't at his funeral per se." I said, I was at Lewis's funeral on Saturday, and then I did not come and stay for the funeral for Mr. Gus. And so he goes, "Oh, okay. Well, I've actually got Chuck on the phone." I said, "Okay, well, Chuck knows me. Tell Chuck Marquita, it's Marquita." And he goes, "Oh, okay, yeah, it's Marquita." So I guess he got the nod of approval, and he was like, all right, buddy. Well, it was a pleasure to meet you, man. Good to meet you. And he, shakes my hand, and he pulls off. Again, probably an uncle, a cousin. I don't even know who he was. But it just brings me back to the point that, like, it was the craziest interaction. I literally just had it. And I don't even know, like, how to feel about it or what to feel about it. There's part of me that wants to cry. There's part of me that's like, dang, you see, this is what I mean. Like, I don't even know my people. They don't even know me, thinking I'm a stranger in the neighborhood, thinking I'm a stranger walking up, am I imposing? Just all these, like, thoughts, feelings, so on and so forth. And so all that to say, like, I don't have a therapist, and I don't have anyone to talk to about these things either. So I'm also trying to build more content and get on YouTube and the TikToks and the Facebooks and all that stuff a little more, or what have you. I don't, know that that's the best thing either. But at the same token, because of my businesses, but people don't know, I've got a natural lifestyle brand. I've got a storefront. I build houses. I'm a licensed realtor. I'm the president of the Austell Business Association. I'm on the city's agricultural steering committee. The milling side of my family, all sharecroppers. And also, what I found out in doing some of the Ancestry deep dive a little more recently, again, not too long before Mr. Gus's passing, I was able to go back and find 4 or 5 generations of the Letts as well as Millens, and trace my ancestry back at least 5 generations to slave rolls and to Civil War drafts. Yes, my family is from Miller County, Georgia. Family is from Jasper, Kelly, Colquitt, Georgia, Bainbridge, Georgia. And like, it's just crazy because you see what's going on in politics, and I see what's going on in my life, and I see what's going on with my family and what I don't know about my family. And again, like, all I can do is be in the moment because I don't really know what to do with it. So anyhow, that was a long story, 40 minutes. I might have to try to edit this, but then maybe not, because I'm trying to post raw material. So that said, let me stop talking. I've stumbled across words enough, and I appreciate y'all listening. There'll be a lot more content because I have a lot more content, and I got a lot more stories and a lot more to craziness, if you will. I feel like it's crazy, but again, it's my life in the sunshine. So anyhow, I'm at my store. I pulled up to my store, and I've gotten to the store now at the Alchemist Den. Keep in mind, the Alchemist. Growing up right there and not knowing it, I always called her Miss Mary, but it turns out, again, I was able to find out who she was. And so it's been a very interesting 4 years, but in that 4 years, I also, one second. I almost wish I would have caught that. It's crazy. We missed the interaction, but, so yeah, I wanna buy that lot. But I stand here, the house is there in red. You see it. I don't want to give away any addresses, but you see how close it is. So